Neha, it's visible.
So as I was saying, this I've already covered, and these are our speakers who will be covering these topics. So yes, so the generations on OCT, the time domain, spectral domain, ultra high resolution, and then the swept source OCT. And here are the images which will tell you exactly what a difference in resolution translates to when we look at the image of the OCT. And here I'd like to point out that earlier, while we were used to very colorful images, it's now preferable to see the black and white images for better appreciation of details and not to miss features or structures that may be masked by these pseudo colors. So again, just revising, the wavelength is the same in time and spectral domain, whereas in swept source, we have a longer wavelength. There was a single detector in time domain replaced by a spectrometer in spectral domain, and now a photodiode detector in swept source OCT. Of course, the number of A scans per second is almost more than 10 times over these, and the scan length has also increased, allowing for a wider area to be visible in a single scan. And as I said, the resolution has been decreasing. So the interpretation of an OCT image depends on the optical properties of the tissue, namely absorption, transmission, and the scattering. So the backscatter or the reflected is one which is responsible for the OCT signal. So we have structures which are hyperreflective, such as inflammation, hard exudates, blood, and scars. And then we have structures which are hyporeflective, such as edema, serous fluid, and sometimes shadowing from hyperreflective structures. So when we clinically interpret an OCT, these are the layers that we look at: the vitreoretinal interface and the foveal contour, the retinal architecture, and the RP choriocapillaris complex. And now with EDI and swept source, two more important structures have been added, namely the vitreous and the choroid and the choroidoscleral junction. So let's first understand what normal looks like. This is a normal scan, a swept source OCT scan, which we are familiar with: the foveal contour, the layers, and the choroid. So be wary of this bulge that you see under the fovea. This is normal. And these structures are actually blood vessels which cause underlying shadowing. They should not be misinterpreted as abnormal structures. Whenever you look at a scan, be sure to corroborate with the fundus image and be sure to note the direction of the scan which has been taken. Now, starting with the vitreous, the enhanced vitreous mode allows us to see these structures which were earlier not possible. And here we see what is known as the precortical vitreous pocket. So this is connected to the Clockwitz canal by a valve, which has been shown histopathologically and is now visible on swept source OCT as well. And many of us would have encountered this when we, stain the vitreous, especially in cases of macular hole, etc. Intraoperatively, we exactly get this kind of structural feel there as well. Now, in this landmark paper by the International Consensus Panel on OCT, published in Ophthalmology in 2014, these are the terminologies which have been introduced, which we currently use. Now, the authors noted slight differences in the Heidelberg spectralis and the Zeiss OCT, and hence these two different images. So starting from the anteriormost layer, which is the posterior cortical vitreous, next we go to this pre-retinal space, followed by the nerve fiber layer, which is hyperreflective, the ganglion cell layer, which is moderately hyperreflective, the inner plexiform, and then the inner nuclear layer, which is hyporeflective, and then again the outer plexiform, which is hyperreflective. Now, this is followed by the outer nuclear layer, which is a hyporeflective band. And following this, we get our first line, which is the external limiting membrane, or the ELM. This is followed by two zones, the myoid and the ellipsoid zone. The ellipsoid zone is hyperreflective because it is said to contain more of the mitochondria. And then after this, we have another zone, which is the outer segment of the photoreceptors. This is followed by the IZ, or the interdigitation zone. And then finally, we have the RPE-Brooks complex. So this small space is tightly packed by these zones and membranes, which are said to contain various parts of the photoreceptor. Now, after this, coming on to the choroid, the anteriormost are the choriocapillaries. This is followed by the Sattler's layer, which are the medium-sized choroidal vessels, and then the Haller's layer, which is the large-sized choroidal vessels, and then the choroid-scleral junction. So here you see these same structures on the serous OCT. Now, next, coming to the visualization of the choroid. So there are two current methods by which we can do this. First is the EDI, or the enhanced depth imaging OCT. Now, this moves the imaging focal point of the spectral domain OCT, that is the zero delay line, more posteriorly, allowing for a stronger returning reflection from the choroid, resulting in better definition of details. This is what we have on our Heidelberg spectralis. The other way to image the choroid is through sweat source OCT. Now here, as we know, the wavelength is longer, the number of A scans per second is more. So this allows for increased tissue penetration, almost double of spectral domain. Hence, even in very thickened choroids, you can see the choroidoscleral junction on sweat source OCT. Now, the choroidal thickness should be interpreted with caution. It is highly dependent on age. As we see, with age, this thickness should decrease. But in the pachychoroid spectrum disorders, we see an increase in the thickness, which would not corroborate with the age. Similarly, RAP and subretinal drusenoid deposits, these are disorders where you would see more choroidal thinning as opposed to the pachychoroid disorders. Now, so to conclude, there have been unprecedented advances in the imaging of the retina and the choroid. Recognition of newly described terminologies has clinical implications and may provide insights into histopathology and pathophysiology. We need to keep abreast of this proliferation of literature and apply it in day-to-day practice. Getting a better grip of these newer concepts and imbibing them will eventually improve outcomes for our patients. Newer concepts also lead to more questions, which when formalized can convert into research ideas, and such projects can add meaningful contributions to global scientific literature. So thank you for this introduction.